Hi there, welcome to my tutorial. I have decided to create a new tutorial based off this color study. Don't worry, it'll look a lot prettier. I just had to make my mind up on the composition and the colors I'm going to use. And yeah, so let's go ahead and start. Basically, I'm going to be using a mixture of my own brushes and Procreate originals, but I'll give you an alternative every time I do use my own. So to begin with, on this A4 canvas, I'm going to start with the hollow square brush from my own set. As an alternative, go ahead and grab any airbrush, to be honest, because this is the background and I'm starting with a very pale light orange. I'm just gonna pop that in the middle sort of thing here, and I'm going to move towards a more lighter orange that is, brighter than the other one. I'm gonna add that to the middle there, or the bottom part. Then I'm going to add a slightly darker color just to make sure that this is sort of, visibly moving towards the ground. And with the hard shading brush from my pack or the hard airbrush, I would recommend going in with the smudge tool and just sort of smudging that out just a little bit. Depending on what airbrush you're using or a brush, it will smudge out differently, but I'm sort of just gonna go for a relatively even smudge here. And this here at the top isn't that important to smudge out that well. Most of this will be covered anyways on the second new layer that I'm going to add. And for this one, I'm going to be switching to the Inka brush from Procreate, and with that a darker orange brown, that is more the orange hue. I'm just gonna go ahead and add the first outlines of my trees. I want to have a couple bigger ones and darker ones in the foreground, like these guys, and also one on the edge, sort of leaning towards the middle a little bit. And let's have a couple of roots jutting out there. Doesn't really matter with those right now. I will go ahead and create a new layer beneath that one and switch to a slightly lighter brown for the next set of trees that I'm going to add. And these ones I'm going to give a little bit more interesting shapes, just slightly different than the completely straight ones, making sure that that edge here is good. Alright, and another one on the other side. This is one of my favorite Procreate brushes. It's so smooth to apply with, colors with. With the same brush, I will go ahead and just erase a little bit of the tips of those branches because they're quite thick and I'd like them to fade out a little bit. Just a tiny bit. Okay, and then I want to add one on the edge here too. Gonna give this one also a sort of bowed shape here. And on another new layer in the background, I will go ahead and grab the darkest color from the background at the bottom and then a slightly darker color for the trees that are very far in the distance, or a bit further anyways. And with that we'll achieve a little bit of a distance effect. You can add several sort of tree trunks around, and because we've got them on a separate layer, we can adjust the darkness or the brightness with them, the saturation and the hue. Cancel. Just for your information, so all of those will work. And actually I will go ahead and just lighten the second layer of trees, and and I'll also increase its saturation just slightly so they don't look so washed out. Lovely. And now on the top I want to grab a new layer, and with the same Inka brush I'm just going to go ahead and using a similar sort of color but maybe more towards the yellow orange, I'm going to grab that and add the bases for a path. Once I've added that, just for ease of viewing, I'm going to add sort of like an edge to it in darker and the same sort of hue, just so it's more visible. And then on the edges of that, knowing that this is on top of all other layers, so we will be painting over the other trees, I'm gonna grab a darker desaturated green that's sort of on the way towards warm but not quite, and I will just add that just next to the edges of the path and in between the trees here. And also on the other side, we have just painted over the tree here, so I'm just gonna erase that a little bit and make that part up a little bit. Extending the path, I'll color pick that green I used and then switch to a much warmer, much brighter green for the next set of grassy areas. Alright, in between these two trees, I just want to add a slightly darker separation and have that just go down after that second tree. And I'm going to erase the parts that went over that big tree. And I'll also add, that darker green in between these guys here. Sort of like that, and maybe just a little bit up here, because that will be mostly in the light. Okay, now that we've got sort of the basics down, I think we can go ahead and get more into the rougher parts of this. So in the background, I will go ahead with my hard shading brush, and as an alternative I would recommend the hard airbrush again. And with that one I will want to add darker like cloud type shapes for the foliage that I'm gonna have around. I actually should be picking something slightly lighter for this part here. I'm choosing very desaturated colors so they'll sort of fit back into the background a bit better. And then I'm just going to add that into the background where I feel like I'd like to have a bit of foliage. Then I will be adding a little bit of that in between the trees, so just below the most foreground tree layer. I will use the chalk brush from Procreate, also one of my faves, and I'm just gonna grab a darker, colder green that's also very desaturated, and I'm just gonna add some of the foliage here, just in these sort of very rough motions. And whoops, okay, we're not quite on that layer. Okay, that's fine. Maybe some coming in between here would be quite nice. I quite like that shape. And then also I'll do some over here. Okay, let's go ahead and just quickly shade in some of these trees, because giving them a bit of render will probably help us get closer to where we want to go. So on the furthest back layer of trees, I'm going to create a new layer above that and then enable clipping layer mask. And using the same brush still, I will just go ahead and basically tap the main color of that tree and grab something slightly darker, maybe slightly warmer as well, and just start giving that a little bit of a tree bark texture by sort of just scriggling lines across these tree trunks. Then grabbing something darker and just making sure that at least one edge of or one side of the tree is definitely darker so that it stands out against the background, or you could do both. I'm not quite sure how that will all look, so I'm just gonna go very careful. Okay, I've sort of shaded in the whole thing. Let's see how it will look if I just add a lighter color. Okay, that looks terrible, positively terrible. So I'm gonna start over on the new clipping layer mask with a darker color, just giving it a wild zigzag texture, making sure to get the sides of the tree. Okay, and then on the next tree layer I'm gonna do the same, but color picking that and choosing another slightly darker color to the one that we're using here. Again, sort of adding shade to the edges first this time. And perhaps a little bit of tree bark in between. Alright, and then I will just merge that down, and I'll merge down the other clipping layer mask as well for these trees in the background. Another thing actually I wanted to do is set the very background color to a different color. I'm just gonna go for, well, we can go for red. But I think grey is gonna be the way forward, so I've just chosen a medium grey anyways, because where it peeks through, I don't know if you can see the difference, but it does just take away the glare of the white parts. And then we'll repeat the same step for the foreground trees. Clipping layer mask, and with the chalk brush, a slightly darker color. I'm going to increase the size of my brush and decrease the size of my canvas just so I have an easier time shading in without getting too caught up in the details, and so my wrist can be a bit looser when I'm painting. I like sort of doing these W shapes on the tree bark textured part here. Zigzag works too, but I feel like just having a consistent sort of pattern that is easy to do, like the wavy shape or whatever, or circles, is always nice. Alright, once that is done, I will go ahead and give some of this foliage a bit of different colors. So let's go ahead and create a new layer over the top foliage layer, which is a darker one. And here I will go ahead and grab from my own favorite set the texture brush, and if you don't have that, then I would recommend the old brush from Procreate. That is what I used to use all the time before I developed my own brush, and it has a similar pattern, but I used to supplement it with the studio pen because it wasn't doing the pattern that I wanted it to. And so you might have to use a studio pen as well in addition, just to make sure that the texture is relatively random. That's what I sort of wanted to do with this brush. Anyway, so I've just chosen a slightly darker color, and I'm going through the different areas of foliage and just giving it a little bit of texture. That sort of just makes a world of difference without breaking our fingers or the bank. That doesn't really work in this context, but yep. And once I have added that, I can go ahead and I will add on this new layer with the texture. I will grab the Inka brush. So under the Inka brush from Procreate, I'll choose a slightly lighter color and just go in and add a couple of my own leaves. I feel like the detail is frustrating for some people, so I'm sorry if that is the case for you, but the reason why I like to do it by hand is because I can control where I actually place them, and it doesn't look as mechanic as when you use brushes that contain the actual shape in its stamp, you know what I mean? Obviously, you know, if you have a brush that you like, this will suit here as well. Just going in and adding a slightly lighter color or a warmer color in between the other two tones that we've used, and just giving all of this a bit of shape. Also, again, I've sort of zoomed out with this layer just out of the canvas because these brush strokes can be quite big for this step. It's just sort of getting in a bit more texture that is different and trying to like ascertain what sort of shape I want, I suppose. I'll use the same brush in the eraser part, and I'm just gonna go ahead and add in the bottom part where we've had the sort of base for the foliage. I'm just gonna go in and erase bits and pieces with the Inka brush in eraser, so that it looks a little less intense. It's very blocky right now, it's very full on, and then there are areas where we might have to take out some of that detail we just added, but yeah, we're just sort of trying to get towards a shape that looks natural, lets enough light through from the background. Once you've done that, and I definitely see some areas that I'd want to change from this top part of the foliage. For example, these here look a little bit too intense, so I'm going to go into that layer and just take out some of that extra foliage that I don't like that I've added. Or even just adding holes into that as well. Okay, once that's done, I'm going to merge those two together, and then with a different brush, I will stick with the Inka brush for a minute. Actually, no, I'll change to the chalk brush again. I want to use I want to go ahead into the layer that we've just had, and with the adjustments, I'm going to turn all of that darker. Only by 4%, as you can see, and you can duplicate your layer before if you want to just be on the safe side, but you can always change it back by increasing the brightness by 4%. I want to make it darker though, because on the new layer here I will be adding a brighter color. In this case I'm going to choose a slightly cooler green that is quite saturated. Just see how that looks. That's pretty intense, but okay. Just gonna see how does that feel. Alright, that is way too bright, so I'm just gonna go ahead and choose something darker. But we do have to go brighter, so a struggle. With this chalk brush, I'm just gonna layer this brighter color on top, so that the top leaves are lit up by this a little bit. But these leaves are still too far in the shadow that they would be warm. You know, that's why I'm choosing a more bluish color green, because they won't be hit by the direct sunlight. Actually, that's a bit much over there. I'm gonna go back into the other one and just erase a little bit of this here. Alright. Also, some of that chalk I'm just gonna erase a little bit as well from that brighter area we just added, to let some of that other stuff through again, because I really did like the shape that we ended up achieving for the main part. Alright, once that is done and you're happy with it, am I happy with it? I hope so. I think so. I think that would be fine. I will just go ahead and merge that down, and also on a new layer above that again with the Inka brush I'm going to go in and choose a darker color than the foreground trees. and I'm just going to add a couple of branches that look like they're sort of coming out from that tree, or perhaps from one of the others around. Small and fine is a good idea here because, you know, they just add a little bit of life without being too much in the foreground. You can also just add a couple that are like sticking out for no reason. Like that, sort of. And once that's done, let's go ahead and move into the foreground. In the topmost layer with the ground, I'm going to create a new layer above that, and with the chalk brush again, now I'm going to really define all these different values. So the foreground wants to be dark, much like the dark leaves above. So I'm just going to grab a darker green that matches that a little bit, and I'm just going to go ahead and in this sort of grass type motion, in this vertical brush line motion, I'm just going to add grass in this way. Not covering up the entirety of what we've added here before, but yeah, that's fine. And then I'll grab the background warmer color, and I'm going even warmer, but should I go darker or brighter? I'll go a bit darker first. Whoops, hello. Darker, please. And just see if I can add that to the bottom of that tree, if that will make it look a little bit more realistic. And in between, I'm just gonna add that brighter color yellow that comes out on the other side. Choosing similar green colors and switching between warm and, you know, not quite so warm as, you know, I sort of move through the painting. Where I want the sunlight to sort of hit directly, I will have it warmer, and where it, you know, where I don't really want it to hit quite so intensely, I'm gonna have it darker, cooler. And then just at the base of these trees, I do want to have darker grass, so it looks like, or anyways, matching grass, so it looks like the trees are actually there. Here, for example, I've chosen too dark a color. It doesn't match the actual tree. And we're just sort of interspersing the green with these lighter values. And intenser colors. I don't want to have it quite that intense here. This is sort of just for the rough part of this painting. We're gonna add details and stuff as we go in a minute. Also, you can redraw some of the tree bark that you've over painted here if you like. Closer to the foreground trees, I'm gonna have more intense and cooler colors. And around the path, if you want to go for it, you can add a slightly darker rim of green as well, that we can, you know, overpaint or not overpaint. That will make it look a little bit more natural maybe, but we'll do the same with the path in a minute, so it's not too, so don't worry about it looking too much right now, it's fine. talking about the path, that is a pretty important detail. So let's go ahead and create a new layer for that and just add some stuff for the path. I'm going to decrease the size of my brush a little bit, and first of all, grab a much darker brown and just add where I'd like to have some shadow. I want the light to come from the right side there, so I'm just going to create these longer shadows that come from those trees that are standing on the right. Obviously we need to respect that with the actual green values too, so I'm just going to grab some darker grass colors and just sort of add that just below this tree, for example, with its shadow, and also this one. And then first of all, it's already pretty important that this here is too dark, so I'm just going to choose a more desaturated, lighter color that is going to be, you know, the shadow for that tree. Alright, and then moving from the forwards, from the front to the back, this foreground part will have a lot more gray in it and is lighter than the rest, so I'm just going to add a light gray to the edge here. Moving along, I've left a little bit in there free so we can have a bit of play between, you know, light and shadow, and then I'm using this gray tone that's slightly darker just to sort of add that to the edges where the path ends basically. And then once I've added that, I'm going to choose a more intense color for the path as it starts to get closer to us, and also add sort of areas in the path that are a little bit higher, a bit lower. So I'm adding the shadow first, and I'm going to build up on that one. Some areas will be lighter even if there is a big long shadow coming through, because there's hills and stuff where the light catches differently. So I'm going to add a bit of light in there too, like this, a lighter color similar to the base we had earlier. And then similarly, I'd like to have a bit of a hill here and here. And then I want to grab a darker brown and just sort of add that as the contrast to these hills. It might be a bit intense, so I'm just going to grab the other color and paint over those. And then I'll grab a darker color and just have that come in from the edge. I know it looks a little bit messy and it's not that straightforward, but it will come together. So just adding that darker edge here, going much darker and more intense in saturation as we come towards the foreground. So that is a bit too dark over here. But it's usually quite obvious when you feel like it sticks out like a sore thumb. Then for that gray shadow, I'm gonna give that a bit more of a definition by going over it again, and the same over here. Making sure that the hills have got another slightly lighter shade right next to where that ground is higher. So I guess it makes no sense that this area here is higher. So yeah, we'll correct that with the grass in a minute, but no great shakes. Alright, and then this guy here will have a long shadow coming into the edge here. Alright, well, now that we've sort of got the main players together, I guess we can focus on the actual details and stuff. So first of all, I'll create a new layer for that. I usually work on the top from here on out because it's easier. And with the chalk brush here, as we're using it, I'm gonna go to the furthest back tree and add a slightly darker base to it. This is right on top of everything now, so we can sort of basically shape the tree in a better way, improve it, or, you know, I sort of wanted to have, oh no, that wasn't that tree. By also color picking colors from the background and then molding it a little bit more I'll use the Inka brush again to sort of add twigs and stuff to this one. And then with a lighter color also following up on the darker shades I've added for the twigs so it looks more natural. Switching back to the chalk brush for the actual detailing on the tree, and yeah, just giving that a bit of a different shape to what we had. Light darker colors just sort of on the edge there, and I wanted to go into a dip here, so it'll be darker, and then here too. With the Inka brush again, I'm just going to add a bit of that background color in here. Okay, and the same repeating for the other tree, so we're sort of just refining the shapes with a slightly darker color, going around it. I want this branch to sort of come out from behind the tree, so I'm going to give it a slightly darker shading here, and perhaps just sort of this is coming out here, by the way, this is this one, giving it a darker rim on the edge here and darker on here. Darker again where I've just painted over. Okay, and then we can also just sort of add a couple more defined swirls and patterns for the tree trunk. I like these swirls a lot, so I'm just going to add a bunch of those. And then shade in the ones that will be a bit darker from the side, so from the left side, because our light is coming from the right. Maybe go slightly lighter and just add that as the shadow color on the left to make it look a bit more natural. And then again a slightly darker color here because this branch is going somewhere else, coming from somewhere else. Alright, and then for this tree here, also going darker first of all. You don't have to use the same colors for all the different tree layers, you know, you can have this one be darker than that one and still be on the same layer, for example, and stuff. So, you know, you can make it up as you go, really, whatever happens and stuff. Adding some more swirls here too. I love this brush so much, I can't even say. Just so easy to create these patterns and feels really smooth to work with. Here also I'd like to grab a slightly lighter, more saturated color and just sort of add that on the edge here where the light is going to hit this. Feels like this tree isn't particularly lit up, so just having one edge that looks brighter. And perhaps also for the other one over here, but I've gone slightly darker. There may be more foliage in the way hindering the direct light. You know, you can make up the rules really for the light in your painting. Alright, and then again over here, just you see these patterns are still very intense. They stick out a lot, so I'm going to try and choose colors that lie in between, you know, this one and this one. Going a bit darker on one of them, but not quite as dark as the other one is, and then using that as a transitioning color, for example, on the shady edge, just sort of shading in the areas with that color. or deepening some of these lines and ridges, some of these edges. Also this background one I forgot about, so I'm just going to grab a slightly darker color than that one and just give it a brand new edge here. And also this one over there. I like being able to paint over everything, which is why I paint on the top. By the way, I will grab a lighter color for the grass because this doesn't seem to really match the tree that well in terms of lightness, but also this light is a bit too light, to be honest, for the position it's in. So I've chosen a slightly darker color and I've just gone over the really bright parts. But here on the other hand, I will go ahead and grab that lighter color again and just add that a bit more because it is right in the light area. And also maybe a little bit more of pattern on this one. Wow, I feel like this is a very bulgy tree. And with the Inka brush again for a sharper edge, I'm just gonna add the sky color in here. Alright, oops. Okay, going back to this tree over here with the chalk brush. To be fair, we could go into the back layer here because this one is so far back, so yeah, I'll go into a new layer over this tree here and create some swirls without actually painting over everything else. In this case, that is really helpful. Darken some of these areas. And some of these edges that you can barely see through these trees. I don't even know where I am adding these darker brush strokes up there, but it looks good. With a slightly lighter color again, just trying to match these different colors here, finding a transitioning value. This was quite dark, so I'm just going to add a slightly lighter color back in. Not quite as light as the actual light color though, so that's nice. Also, I feel like I want to add a little bit of the same color to this tree up here. It's quite dark, and this is supposed to be a little bit further afield. Okay, and now for the foreground trees, sticking to the foreground most top layer, I'm just going to grab a darker color that's even more red, to be honest, and I'm just going to give this here an edge again, painting over where I've painted before, with the other trees, for example. Really redrawing some of these branches so they are nice and sharp, or dark rather, because it's not very sharp. And then also, you know, really deepening these ridges and stuff. Since I'm not using a reference for this, I am making it up as I go, I hope. I hope it's not confusing. Okay, and then on the edges here. Big swirl patterns, building up on what I had before. It doesn't have to be the same, to be honest. It could be something completely new across everything else, because really you might be just adding a bit more extra depth to your texture with that. That's a bit intense, this texture. And now, picking the lighter color, I'm going to grab a more saturated but redder, slightly redder, even redder color, and I'm just going to use that in between. Also grab a slightly darker color and darker again, and perhaps slightly desaturated. Yep, just so it fits in with the other values and it's not quite as bright. gives the whole thing a bit of color. Then I'll grab a slightly lighter and perhaps more orange color, and the edges that may be more in light, get a bit more of this lighter color. Some of these branches as well. And then just starting over with the other tree, picking the lightest color in the tree and then grabbing something darker, more red. And I'm just going to go over some of these lighter areas with this. This brush will also give it a nice bit of texture. Oh, no, again. And before the Apple Pencil battery runs out, let's hope we can finish all of the trees. This one, see, this is slightly too dark for some reason, so I'm going to pick a slightly lighter color there, and it needs a bit more dark here for this tree. Perhaps slightly darker again, just giving it a bit of shading on this area, this edge here. Okay, trees are done. Nice. So I would like to work on the foliage in the background there that is, you know, barely hinted at, and perhaps also the actual, you know, background sky. But I realized that I have painted over some areas with the sky color, so I'm just quickly going to erase those. Oh, my phone has also got low battery. Let's hope that doesn't change the recording. So yeah, I'm just gonna erase these and then go back to the actual original layer where I had wanted to erase that in the first place. I think that's it, to be honest. Nice. And also I have painted over some areas with green, but I'm just gonna erase the actual tree parts first so I know what I'm doing when I erase the green. Let's go back into the foreground, erase the green. Okay, so the background is nice and clean now. We can change the background color anytime, we can change the foliage anytime. And I don't know if you see that, but I love the gray in the background. Hello. So let's go into the background layer. Actually, okay, I've just deleted the background layer for the color, and I'm also going to delete the background foliage. Sorry about that, I have changed my mind completely. So for the background layer, I want to utilize the gray that we have got in there because it looks really nice in contrast, but I'm not going to have it entirely in gray, so I'm going to grab an orange color, and with the hard shading brush or the overlay, the airbrush in your case, I will just go in from the bottom and add this sort of mist to the background that comes from the bottom up and has a sort of more intense bottom part. You can go ahead and just erase that gently if you've gone a bit too much or if you've gone in a shape you don't like. I'll just go a bit like this. And also I want to go ahead and just add a lighter red gray to the middle there, and then a darker red to the top. This has got sort of storm vibes, and we're still not finished with the details yet, so there's still plenty to do with the grass, for example. Maybe we should go ahead and do the grass, but actually I think I'm just going to merge that together. I will go ahead and just add the light first. So on a new layer with the add light, let's go ahead and grab a really intense orange with the hard shading brush or an airbrush. I will just go ahead and have a couple of these sun rays come in. depending on how strong you are going to press on this, there's gonna be more light. Anyways, I'm gonna move this with the freeform tool and just sort of push it a bit together, make it a little bit more narrow, sort of like that, shift it, like, yeah, I want to have it a bit lower. Feels like it's a sort of sunset lighting. And with the smudge tool and the hard shading brush, I'm just going to go in and smudge out what I have done here. Alright, let's go ahead and just erase some parts where it wouldn't be. So I wouldn't want it to come through this here, for example. I'm going to erase this part where it hits the tree. I want it to be behind the tree and behind the foliage. This tree is also in the foreground. I'm just going to go ahead and erase that. And these two, and just a little bit so it's not quite so strong in the other areas. This tree wouldn't have any light on it, and none in the foliage. Not there anyways. I'm gonna set this to motion blur and just go ahead and blur that out with the motion by pulling it down. And then again, I just sort of wanna squeeze that together just slightly, like that. Okay, and now we can go ahead and adjust our painting to this a little bit. I do want to squeeze it together a bit more actually. So there's just sort of at the bottom here. Okay, so it's sort of figuring it out from here really. Let's grab an overlay brush, overlay layer, a new one on top, setting it to the overlay. And with the same broad brush, I want to go ahead and just add a bright red. Maybe decrease the size of the brush, add it to the edge of these trees in the foreground. They will still be warmed by the surrounding colors in the foreground, like around them. And I'll just choose a very dark saturated red for the edge of these trees. Sort of like in the middle. I'm gonna go back into the add layer, and with the hard shading brush or with an airbrush, I would recommend just erasing some of the light that is coming through and hitting some of these trees. I'm just going to go ahead and smudge that out a little bit more. Once that is done, I will go ahead and create a new layer on the top. Oh, actually, we can do some more with the overlay layer. So with the hard shading brush or the airbrush, go ahead, grab a darker desaturated orange and give the trees that are just sort of in the range of light, give them a darker edge. And also the foliage can get a darker topping as well. Then also sort of here, we have got these long shadows coming from the foreground. So the other thing we know is we need another add layer that we can add another lighting source from the top, from the bottom right. So I'm gonna grab another strong orange and have the light come through from here. And this is gonna be the reason why there are these long shadows. This is a bit intense, so I'm just going to smudge that together, push it together a bit with the smudge tool. I feel like the background warrants for more trees and stuff, but yeah, we're gonna take care of that in a moment, I think. Alright, so unfortunately it's evening now, so I am struggling with the lighting. All we have to do really is the last final bit of, you know, background and some more detailing. Move into the background real quick, guys, because this is gonna be really fun. And in the background, let's grab something like the Inka brush, okay? Something everybody's got access to. And now if you go onto the background main bright color and you choose something that's sort of gray and a bit more like towards the green, let's just see how that would look. Oh, that's really bright, so maybe we have to go and put this. That's really bright, what the hell? Let's try this a bit darker. Okay. Right. Oh, and that is invisible, so we've sort of hit the exact... Wow, what in the world? I don't know why I haven't experienced this before. And we're just gonna try and draw like big tree shapes, you know, like where you can see they're gonna be huge in real life if you were to stand in front of them. So thick with lots of branches. Let's try. And also just adding the actual foliage straight on top with the same color. I mean, if this isn't gonna look good, I'm just gonna like, you know, looks like a broccoli right now, but if it doesn't look good, I will just go ahead and delete it because hell, I'm just gonna add a heck of a lot more branches and hope that will sort of do something for this. And also erase a couple of spaces so it actually looks a bit more tree-like, less broccoli monster. It still looks like a broccoli monster. And adding some manual leaves, just dotting around. And also going in and just dotting in some, you know, parts where the light will come through, little areas, you know, what I'm doing, like this stuff, where the light in the background comes through. And at the edge in particular, because it looks a little bit too smooth. Whoa, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just gone back to the normal. Yeah, that is luckily the last saved color. And I'm just gonna go in and add a bunch of individual leaves closer to the tree. You know what? I'm not mad at this. I'm actually going to create another layer and add another one behind that. So in theory, it would have to be lighter, but I don't really know what color that would be. So I'm just experimenting with the adjustment section. I think that would be good. So what kind of color is that? We have to turn the add layer and the overlay and the other add layer off to see that. Right, and this is the other tree. I'll turn it all back on. And then in the background here, I'm just going to add that other tree in that color. And because it's on a layer below the other tree, we can just carefree walk all over the other stuff we've done. I mean, this is supposed to look like branches, but does it? I'm just going to tap in again some air pockets into the whole broccoli shape. And obviously some individual leaves with the same brush. Again in the same color. I'll go a bit darker as well, just as we go down towards the light. I'm just going to add these couple of branches that really stick out. And so hopefully that will convey the actual shape object here as well. And going in and just adding a couple of these leaves. Nice. Well, the experimentation is going well, I guess. I hope you feel the same. I hope it looks like something on the actual screen. I think so. Okay, and now that that's sort of done, I also want to go into the other tree and I want to go and add a darker base. I want it to stick out against that really bright orange bottom here. Just adding like a couple of accents to the branches and stuff, making it come into the foreground a bit more. That is pretty dark, so I'm just going to go a bit lighter and see what that does, especially up here. I know I should have gone a bit lighter anyways. Just going a little bit up into the tree, but not that much with the second color. And I want to erase a little bit on this edge so it actually looks like, you know, it's a tree and there's nothing else going on over there. And I'll go a bit lighter again just to add those background leaves in the edge here, and like these guys on the side, just making sure this doesn't look completely false. Adding a couple of these air pockets in the top and in the side. Yeah, you know what? I am really liking this, although I feel like I'd probably need to adjust some things. Like, you know, what would it look like without all of these add things? I'm finding it quite hard to make these decisions on the spot, to be honest. I'm just going to go below all the different trees in the background and I'm going to add really bright white on a normal layer. That will really highlight some of these leaves. I think that will look a lot sharper than if we added it on top. Yeah, I'm much happy with that. Just adding a sort of horizon edge maybe as well that is brighter, and then just adding the light around. There are a bunch of trees here. Just a little bit up, not all the way I don't think. Make sure it looks layered. And in some areas it's a bit too intense for me, so I'm just going to go in with the eraser and just gently erase some out of that pocket here. Yeah, I think that looks good. Sort of just smudged it out a bit as well. Alright, and now let's go ahead and at the very top add some details in. So generally speaking, for the grass I'm going to grab the Inka brush now, and I also want to make sure that the grass is just, you know, looking a bit detailed. So I'm going in, I'm color picking the color area I'm working on, and then I'm just going in with a slightly darker color, adding little you know, these brush strokes, that's so hard to say for me. And I'm going to increase the brightness and the warmth of my grass as I move towards the light sources. It would be nice to have really intense changes in color and grass where the light source is, you know, like for example here, this area, we know that's going to be really bright, and so I want to go in with a warmer, darker color first, just to, you know, add the warmth into this area with this really intense, and then go up into the light area and just add our grass that way. Having a warmer boundary will just really make everything pop in terms of that warmth, I feel like. If I'm, you know, whether or not I'm actually doing that right as I'm saying it or not, I don't know, but I know that theory to be the case. And then up here I'm just going to add a bunch of really bright grass. And in the distance there, there's a tree, so I'm just gonna add a little bit there, just so like a peak sort of thing. Here I think it would be quite cool to have a little bit of lighter grass, you know, just sort of peeking through here, and then, you know, gradually losing in warmth and just going a bit brighter in the actual cooler greens, because there's still, everything is still lit around, you know, you still want to have the stuff here lit up and not completely dark. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add whatever feels like it's missing. In areas where there's too much light, I need to add shadow. In areas where there's too much shadow, I need to add light, sort of thing, you know? Here I want to go into the warm area again with the grass. I'm just going to add this like sunny color first, adding a brighter color after. Maybe I should have gone warm dark first, to be honest. Darker yet. Same over here and there. Go ahead and add a really bright green in green grass in here. Green is debatable. This one needs to be a bit darker to stand out. Here I want to add some darker grass in. Another thing to check is, are your other shadows standing out too much? Like with this tree here, is that tree shadow darker than actually the shadow in your grass? And if so, why? I guess, you know, sort of making sure that the values match in the area that you are working in. Just gonna redraw these couple of branches, and then we've got this grass here that's quite dark. Mercury is also a great brush from Procreate that I would recommend anytime. I think that's a really fun one, but it does change its color when you draw over the same line again, so whether that's something you want to deal with or not, that's, yeah, it can be useful in some situations, but not all, definitely. So here I'm gonna go even darker into, even colder into the blue and darker and a bit desaturated, because I don't really want to add blue grass too much, but blue tinged gray green grass, sure. Well, I can't believe how often this has happened now, but the storage was full. So the good news is the only thing I've done really is added some extra brush strokes to the tree here, this here. I finished the grass as much as I sort of want to do that at the moment. And I've added a couple of leaves over there. But that's pretty much it, so that's not a bad thing. Yeah, so let's continue with the details so we can finish this and wrap it up, because yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I want people to have a nice time and not to get frustrated at a 3-hour video. So anyways, yeah, I've grabbed that medium color from this here, from this bundle of green leaves, and I've just started to add a couple more to them to shape it a bit nicer really, mainly. And I want to go over some of these branches that feel a bit like they're really heavy here. Whoops, I want to find a green between the background green here and the green here, and I think it might have to be something like this, because I'd like to add that a little bit to the tree in the middle there. But I will go on a new layer, and I think I will put that sort of here, so it's not quite on top of everything else. I think that's a good green, so I've just chosen like a like an orange, and I'm going to use that for the middle foliage here. Foliage. And I just want to go over some of these, what's it called? Branches. And obviously because I'm doing this on a different layer, I won't be able to paint over all of these branches that I want to paint over, but I can rectify that. So yeah, just a bit of extra green, a bit of a different layer of values. Oh my goodness, I can't believe my phone is now telling me that we've got 20% left of battery and I've just charged it. Today, like some days it just doesn't go that easy with the whole video recording thing. Alright. I think we can leave it at that detail, to be honest. I think if I took another a long time, I would probably go ahead and basically add a bunch of detail to the path and a bit more to the trees. And yeah, I don't like some of this grass, but it's okay. I've just wanted to do one more thing. So I've got a new add layer on the very top, and with the hard shading brush or an airbrush in your case, I would recommend just sort of, whoops, not that big, but adding a bit of light to some of the grass around that is lit up most. Maybe coming in from here a bit more, like that, a bit more intense light over here, there. Just making sure that there is some extra warm and fuzzy stuff going on. And on the path too, why not? The stuff where it's supposed to be bright, brighten that up a bit more. There are obviously the shadows that we've added earlier, so I don't want to do anything about that. But yeah, something like just on the edge here where there's a bit more warmth going on. And is that an add layer? Yes, it is. So I want to go and create a new layer as an overlay layer to add some more shadows, mainly on the path. So with a dark desaturated brown, orange brown, just going in with the same brush and adding some shadows to the path. You can do that with blue too. Blue is going to be cooler. It's going to look nice on some of these trees, perhaps just on the edges. And then you can go in and with the Stoker brush and Procreate, just erase stuff where you know it's a bit intense. Like on the path here is a bit much. Just go in and erase a bit, and thereby you're also adding texture, so you could repeat the same thing here. A bit too much, go in, erase a bunch of stuff, and then you're left with a texture that also still reveals some of that darker, darker stuff. Okay, so that's done, and then the final thing, and yes, I'm going to create another new add layer for that. With the Lightpen from Procreate, I will go ahead and add a bunch of fireflies, because that is sort of my style and I love doing it. And I'm just going to add that, particularly coming through the middle here. You can vary them in color and size, and you can make them like stay close to specific things. I like them close to the light sources. And yeah, just have them drift them around. I'll go a bit darker and more red for the ones that are sort of in the shadows. And they are like little glowing lights everywhere. I love that. And then the other thing we could do is add a couple of flowers. So once we've added all this stuff, I'll create a new normal layer, and this is also where I would usually do normal final details, such as, let's just do a real quick example so you could do that if you want. I'm going to choose my favorite Grainy Detail brush, and if you don't have that, I think pencil would be good, or something else with a bit of texture. Even the chalk brush would be good. You go and pick the brightest color of the bunch, and you add even brighter color or dots to the path around. You pick the same color and just add the same everywhere as well, like that. You can go darker, you can go lighter. The main thing is that you are basically creating a bit of texture, and it's really easy doing it this way, sticking to the similar values. I've also added like a couple of last sort of grassy details. maybe with a bit of a lighter green, like that. And maybe just have it come out a bit like this. But yeah, this is a really intense transition, by the way, between the ground and the bushes, so I'm just gonna add a bit more dark shadow to this real quick. This happens quickly though, I do get lost in the details very fast, so I'm gonna try and not do that. So yeah, sort of just adding the brightest points and places. And for the flowers, I would be using some of my favorite brushes, but if you don't have those, if you don't have access to mine, which are, you know, the defined coloring brush, then I would go ahead and use the Inka brush for this one. You choose a slightly darker color than the one that you would want to add. And I'll do a new layer for that as well, just in case. You add that sort of in these like little, you know, leaf motions. The Inka brush has got a great texture. And go even darker. You want to make these look a little bit realistic, right? Because otherwise they stick out. Like if you were to use a brush that already has flowers stamped on them, they just stick out because they look fake. So these imperfect shapes are really nice. So yes, I recommend it. Anyways, you grab the brightest color that you had in there and you go brighter and lighter, warmer, whatever you want. And you can either do that in the middle then and add that, and I'll add a slightly darker but still brighter color in these other ones, just for a bit of color variation, a bit of value variation, so that it looks like, you know, they've got something more going on, maybe. And then we can also add a couple of brighter green grasses to accompany them. I will switch to the Mercury brush again for that. Make sure that they've got some sticking over them, you know, as they would do, and make sure that some of them look like they are actually just stem. And then I wouldn't mind if we pulled the add layer with the fireflies on the top, because it's an add layer. We can go in and we could either add a light pen dot in the middle of these, or you could go in and just add a little bit of a glow with an airbrush, like that. You can add a glow around these fireflies. Whatever takes your fancy. Anyways, we could go on this and do this for hours, but yeah, let's wrap it up. So yeah, there we go. This is the final piece, and I hope, whoops, let me see if I can just show you better. Sorry about the finger. I hope you had fun, and I hope you like your own results, and I'll see you in the next one, I hope. Leave me a comment with feedback if you want, and I've got plenty more tutorials on Patreon, so yeah, please check that out. The girl needs to eat. Anyways, that was the last cry for help. I hope you have a nice day. Bye!